Rhythm guitar can be very easy to do suboptimally, especially since we're often very focused on playing lead. But it is a very important component of your guitar playing. So here are 5 things you can start practicing right now to improve your rhythm guitar playing. I think we need to start out by talking about the right hand, or the picking hand if you're a southpaw, because the picking hand really is the foundation for tone, confidence, and stability in our guitar playing. It's often said that your left hand is what you know, but your right hand is who you are. It is the engine that drives the guitar, while the left hand might be the steering wheel, so to speak. Right hand motion is essentially a ratio between 3 elements: the fingers, the wrist, and the elbow. I want to start out by talking about the fingers, which directly influence the pick hold, because I think that is the most important concept here. If you have one by you, just pick up a guitar pick right now and look at the intersection between your thumb and forefinger. A lot of guitarists, especially beginners, have pick holds that look a little bit like this, where the thumb and the forefinger are almost in line with each other, or maybe there's even the middle finger coming in to help out the pointer finger on the opposite side of the pick. You really don't want this unless you're Pat Metheny. You essentially want your thumb and forefinger to be pointing in opposite directions, or at least as close to opposite as you can get. This is going to give you more stability, it's going to give you more control over your tone as well. It's going to give you more speed. It carries over into your lead playing, and I think it will overall make you more confident by giving you a little more strength in your picking hand as well. Once again, I do think this is probably the most important change you can make to your technique after this video, because the other concepts, if you're playing everything right with your left hand, but you have a picking hand that's hindering you, you're not going to get anywhere. As for the wrist and elbow, this may be a little bit less complicated, but still important nonetheless. One mistake I see some guitar players make is not use enough wrist motion, both in their rhythm and their lead playing. You want to have the right amount of snap in your wrist and not be playing too much from the elbow. I'll demonstrate real quick. That might be a little over-exaggerated, but you get the general idea. You want to be able to feel that wrist motion while you're playing. You don't want to be playing too much from your elbow because you can get tension in your arm really quick. One more thing with the right hand is you want to make sure you're actually strumming the right area of the strings. That might sound a little bit obvious, but I see some players trying to strum way up here or back here. That's going to be way too harsh. This is going to be way too mellow and tinny. You want to find the right sweet spot, which for this guitar, it's right about here, I think. And as your ear develops, you'll be able to hear the tone differences more and more. Second thing on this list that you need to do is use a proper pick. I see a lot of people using picks that are just way too thin, picks that are under 1 millimeter, that really aren't going to give you optimal tone. I personally use a pick that's about 1.5 millimeters thick. You don't have to go quite that thick. You can get by with just over 1 millimeter or 1 millimeter. I definitely wouldn't go under 1 millimeter. Thicker picks generally give you better tone in both your rhythm and your lead playing. They also increase your speed in your lead playing since you don't have as much flex when you're going through the strings. There's lots of great options for flat picks out there these days. I'll put a few of my personal recommendations here on screen. These are just some picks that I've had good results with. Number 3, stop strumming aimlessly. A lot of players don't really have a solid rhythm pattern, and their strumming ends up sounding like this. You really want your rhythm to be steady. You want to use a good solid rhythm pattern as your foundation. One of the most popular and one of the most tried and true methods is the standard boom chick method, if you will. Just alternating bass notes with strums. All I'm doing right there is just plucking a bass note of a chord, in this case G, strumming through probably the bottom 4 strings of this particular chord. Then I'm using another bass note, in this case the 5 of the chord D, and repeating that same strum. Essentially all you're doing is combining what a bass player might do with what a snare or a mandolin might do. Now that's just a really basic rhythm pattern. If you actually wanted to make it sound a little more interesting, you might add a few more strums. All I'm doing is adding a few more strums on top of that first one. You can experiment with these on your own, it's a lot of fun. Here's an example over, for instance, C. And so on and so forth. One thing you really want to avoid is this kind of rhythm pattern in most situations. That really just doesn't have the same drive to it as. Fourth, substitute chords. Substitute chords are basically chords with notes other than the first, third, and the fifth added in to lead your ear to the next chord. For instance, using a seventh tone on the 1 chord leads your ear to the 4 chord. What's coming next? It's a very natural resolution because this 7th wants to resolve to the now 3rd, the 3rd over the 4 chord. This concept applies with any 4 chord. Take D, add in the 7th, and you want to go to the 4 chord of D, which is G. That's so satisfying. You can really hear that tension building in that 7th tone. And now we're back to major sounds again. One passing chord I really like is this G7 sus4, which adds in the C note over the G. We're anticipating the 4 already. Basically just using that F note as the 7th, and then using the C note up here, and I'm muting the A string, so you don't have that 2nd ringing out. That would be weird. Real pretty chord. Finally, rhythm fills such as cross-picking, walks, and licks. Cross-picking is just playing through several adjacent strings with alternating pick strokes. This could be contrasted with sweep picking, which is playing through adjacent strings with one downstroke or upstroke, for instance. That's sweep. That's cross-picking. Cross-picking is really one of my favorite techniques. It gave me a lot of options for different sounds. It can be tough to get your fingers around at first, but it really is well worth it. It's a lot of fun. Now, in a rhythm context, cross-picking can be used as a really nice substitute for just the standard bass note strum. For example, and then cross-picking. This is pretty much my favorite thing to do whenever I land on a C chord. It's really nice. It adds a lot of flavor to your playing, since instead of going through that chord all at once, you're kind of spacing it out. This can be used over a lot of different chords, for instance. Finally, one last thing to spice up your rhythm playing: walks and licks. Playing off the bass line concept from earlier. What comes next? We can take that concept from bassist and use it in our guitar playing. You can syncopate that like I just did. You can do it straight. You can skip that chromatic note. You can do a lot of different stuff with walks. I'll just demonstrate a quick little sample, just G, C, D like we've been doing. You can even add cross-picking to your walks. That's a lot of fun. That walk I used from G to C is just a simple G major scale walk. You should know that if you know your major scales. The one I used from C to D is a little bit more chromatic. Slide. use that from G to A too. A similar concept, but a little bit flashier, is licks, for instance. That first lick going from G to C is basically a Tony Rice lick, as most of my licks are. It just goes like this. You're just pulling off from G, then the third, and then pulling off from the minor third. And that's just strumming the chord or whatever you want to do. You can cross-pick that. It's a lot of fun to come up with various licks, add them into various places. I encourage you to come up with your own. Just pull tones from the major scale or include some chromatics in there and have some fun with that. So, recapping, you want to have proper technique and a solid foundation in your pick hand itself. That's going to be the one that's toughest to change to. You should use a proper pick. You need to stop strumming aimlessly and start using a solid rhythm pattern. And of course, have fun experimenting with those substitute chords and those rhythm fills. I really hope this tutorial helped you in some way. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you'll get better at guitar and music through it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I read everyone, at least I try to, because I have no friends. If you learned something new, I encourage you to subscribe. I really hope that you become a better musician through watching my content. Thank you very much for your time. God bless.